Hi, I'm Claudette with They Call Me Martha, and I'm back with another tutorial to show you how I made a full panel shaker with giant shaker bits. Let me first review the items I used to make today's card. I have a piece of patterned paper that is cut to 4 by 5 1/4. I have a standard A2 size card base, and then I have a sheet of clear acetate that's been cut to 5 by 6 1/4. And then for inside our shaker card, I'm kind of going the non-traditional route. I'm going to make a giant shaker bit card. And so to do that, I used stamps and dies to cut these flowers out, as well as the sentiment that we're going to put on the front of our card. And then I also, from my stash, pulled in some more traditional shaker bits like sequins and seed beads that I'm going to pair together so that the card has some sound. All right, so this card comes together, I think, really quick and easy, and I think will be a technique that you could use over and over again with the stamps and dies or supplies that you may have in your stash. Before we get started making our card today, I have a quick favor to ask you. I'm working really hard to build my channel, and so if you are inspired by my work today, if you could give me a thumbs up or even consider subscribing to my channel to get more content like this in the future, those things help me with YouTube and to get my videos out to more paper crafters out in the YouTube community. Okay, let's get started building this card. We're going to start by working with our clear acetate paper. And let me just say that you can buy these card panels now. I think there's a couple of different companies that offer them where they're pre-cut and pre-scored, but I happen to have a lot of clear acetate in my stash, so it was easy for me just to cut down a piece and then score it. So if you have clear acetate or you want to go the more economical route, you can follow this process to build your card front. All right, I'm going to start by scoring on all 4 sides of my clear acetate paper. And remember, this is cut to 5 by 6 1/4. And I want to score at 1/2 inch on all 4 sides. Now, scoring clear acetate can be a little tricky. It wants to slide around a little bit. And so just take your time and make sure that you're lining up at the right marks. And then turn it, and we're going to do the other 2 sides. Again, 1/2 inch all the way around. Okay, and then I want to cut away the bulk of these score lines. We don't need these corners in here, so I'm just going to trim them away. And let me bring in a sheet of paper. I think maybe you might be able to see it a little bit more easily on white. What I'm going to do is cut away the corner here on all 4 sides. And so where these 2 lines intersect, I'm going to cut just to the right of that intersection. And I'm going to do that on all 4 sides. And the angle isn't necessarily important, but the key is you want to make sure that you don't cut right on top of that joint, but rather just to the right of it. So I'm going to rotate around and do all 4 sides. And then a lot of times clear acetate paper comes with a protective film. So, and I'm pretty sure mine has it. So I want to make sure that I remove that before we get going here. And I usually just take a little pick tool and find it and then pull it up. All right, now I'm going to fold and burnish all of these score lines. The thing I really like about full panel shakers is that you don't have to build up the sides for the dimensions. So you don't have to use foam tape or you don't have to use layers of paper to build up your shaker well. So it's a nice option if you want to put together a card very quickly and easily. And I find that this format, you actually get a lot of really good movement inside your shaker card. So all right, now I have my panel, and again, this is cut down to 4 by 5 1/4. And first thing I want to do is just dry fit it without using any kind of glue within the panel here, or within the clear acetate, just to make sure that it doesn't pucker inside. And if it does, you just need to trim down your sides ever so slightly, like 1/8 of an inch, just so that it nestles in there nicely. And you can see here mine's nice and flat, so I think we're good to go. Now I've just brought in some double-sided adhesive And I'm just going to add it to the back of my panel on all 4 sides. You can use wet glue here if you would prefer. It just takes a little bit longer to dry. So just be aware of that kind of as you're building your card, that you're allowing for that dry time. I like to use double-sided adhesive in this step because it goes together so quickly. So this is just 1/2-inch score tape that I'm doing on all 4 sides. So I'm bringing my clear acetate panel back in, and what I'm going to do is seal down 3 of the 4 sides and create like a pocket. And so I'll expose 3 of these liners and then make sure that my card panel is in there nice and straight, and then work my way around. And so now I have this little pocket here, and that's where we're going to fill our shaker. So I'm going to set this aside for a moment and show you how I created my giant shaker bits. Now, traditionally, we know that we typically put these kind of things in a shaker card, and I love using these, but I wanted to incorporate some of these flower stamps and dies that I've been working with. This came from the Flower Happy stamp set that is part of the Simon Says stamp. I believe it was the July card kit. And I also purchased the optional dies. I believe that you can still get both the card kit and even the individual components of the kit itself on Simon Says stamp. I'll link those below. But what I did is I stamped and die cut all of these flowers. From that same stamp set, I heat embossed our sentiment, cut it out, and then added it to some sheet foam. This is going to go on the front of our shaker. Let me show you how I did this. All right, I am bringing out my mini Misty here, my little trusty tool. I love this because it really makes stamping foolproof. You can come back and restamp your image if you need to, and I find I just get a much cleaner impression. So I'm just going to position the stamp and prepare it for heat embossing. So I'm going to use some anti-static powder on my paper first. Okay, I'm using Versamark here to stamp my image. And I'm going to do this a couple of times just to make sure I get a really good impression. And then for embossing powder today, I'm going to use probably my favorite gold of all time. This is by Brutus Monroe, and it's called Gilded. All right, I'm just going to add my embossing powder to my stamped image. And it looks like it's pretty clean. Do it one more time. And then if you do have any stray bits of powder, now is the time to remove it. If you heat set it, it's there forever. So I can see I've got one little piece of stray embossing powder there. Otherwise, I think it looks great. And so let me go ahead and heat set this. All right, once your sentiment has cooled off, you can line up your die if you have matching dies for your sentiment. You can also fussy cut. I do find, however, if I'm stacking with foam for added dimension, you really do need the die cuts because it would be really difficult to line up all of the layers and have them be identical if you're fussy cutting them. So I find that I often invest in the dies that match the stamp sets that I like a lot. So, all right, I'm just going to secure this with some mint tape. Let me run this through my machine and I'll be right back. All right, that came out perfect. Now, you can stack this up for some added dimension. You can do that by cutting the same die cut out multiple times out of cardstock and then gluing them together. Or you can use sheet foam. I like to use sheet foam a lot in my card making. I purchase it in the kids section of the craft store. It's very inexpensive. All right, I'm just going to secure it with some tape and run this through my die cut machine. Punch this out, and now I can glue it to my sentiment. So I'm just going to use a little bit of wet glue for this step, And that gives me a little bit of time so that I can wiggle it around and make sure that it's completely lined up. And one thing I like to do when I use sheet foam on my die cut sentiments, I know it's cut identical to my sentiment, but I like for the foam to sit just slightly underneath. What you can do is you can very quickly run your heat tool over the back of the foam and it kind of shrinks it just ever so slightly. Now be careful if you're doing this step. If you leave it too long, it will completely distort. So I'm just going to do it just for a few seconds. All right, that is ready to go. And so now we can start building our shaker. So again, I've brought back in my clear acetate pocket, and I'm going to start by filling the inside of my pocket with my giant shaker bits. And here you want to just be aware that you're putting them face up. So I'm going to load up all of these cute little flowers that I stamped and cut. See, there's one that flipped over. You want to make sure that it's right side up because once it's sealed, it will be forever in that same direction. Then I thought it would be fun to add some more traditional shaker bits to our card. And so I'm just going to add a few of these things from my stash. So I have, this is a mix by 28 Lilac Lane. I have no idea where I got it. It's been in my stash for quite a while. So I'm going to add, I think, a little bit more. And then this is from Doodlebug. This is called Cupcake. It's a really beautiful pink. And then for the traditional shaker sound, I usually add, my favorite bead is this clear bead. I buy it at Hobby Lobby in their jewelry section. It's actually not a bead at all. There's no hole in it, but they're these little bitty crystal clear, I think they're diamonds. But they add such sparkle to anything that you use them with, and I love the sound that they make. So I don't think you need a whole lot in here, but again, just enough to give that sparkle and shine, and then also the sound. Okay, so you can see I've got a fair amount in there, and now I'm just going to remove the liner from this fourth side and seal up the shaker. And now you can see we get really, really good movement of everything in our shaker. And now we can add this piece to our card base. To attach this shaker to your card base, use a good quality double-sided adhesive. I do not recommend using wet glue on this step because you want to make sure that you get really, really strong adhesion between the shaker and your card base. All right, now I'm going to bring my card base back in and attach this. And so you should have that nice clean white border all the way around. All right, I'm just going to line this up so that it's centered on my card front. And give it a good press. All right, and then to finish off this cute card, I wanted to add the sentiment right across the front. I guess you could also do it maybe in the lower corner, but I like it across the front. You can still see all the pretty shaker bits. And so I'm just going to use wet glue, I think, this time, and then allow it to sit and dry. Now, because you're using wet glue, make sure that once you lay it down, you don't shift it around, or you will end up with glue that shows on your clear acetate panel. So I'm going to set this aside while it dries. I always like to finish off the inside of my card and my envelope while I'm making my card so that it's ready to go. And so inside, I just used some of the paper scraps that were left over from cutting my card panel, as well as adding in just a very thin strip of matte gold cardstock from Simon Says Stamp, and that was to match my sentiment that was done in the gold embossing powder. And then I did the same thing on the envelope. And I also had a leftover flour from making my shaker bits that I added to the front. All right, that is our giant shaker card today. I hope that you're inspired by this design and that you will consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this in the future. Have a wonderful day.